Good morning to my Boundless friends. My name is Bethany Kempfert from Boundless LLC, Myofascial Release and Physical Therapy. If you've joined me earlier this week, I've been talking about balance this week, and today's session is going to be something that I'm going to call the magic pen exercise. You could actually call it by whatever name you wanted, but what I have as just a visualization for this exercise is a pen on a piece of thread. You don't need this tool because you can just use your visualization skills for this, but I'm going to be using this pen on a string like a pendulum. So I'm going to hang that down between the middle of my feet, and I'm going to be hanging it from about my belly button. So the belly button is an essential spot to think about on our body, because that area, the belly button or just a little bit lower towards the pelvis, is really what we call our center of gravity or our center of mass. In other words, if we kind of took and averaged out where all of our weight is distributed in our body, it centers right around this area. So when we think about balance, we really kind of have to think that this area of our body always has to stay over our base of support. Base of support is our feet. So, whatever shape your feet make on the ground, that's essentially the base that your center of gravity has to stay over. So this tool is going to be a really good visual for how we work with that. So I can take my base and move it all the way over 1 foot. And look, when I do that, see how essentially that pen represents my center of gravity. So as I move to one side, and then I move to the other side, you basically get a visual of how that center of gravity is positioned over your feet. So simply doing this exercise where we imagine that you've got this pen dangling on a string, and I call it magic pen because I wouldn't ever get this pen to be able to write on a paper on the floor. But if you imagine you have a paper on the floor, I want you to have kind of this wide stance, this imaginary pen, and I want you to draw a line from 1 foot to the other foot. And just envision your mass making that move all the way from 1 foot to the other foot. Now, if you're somebody who has balance problems, you would want to do this exercise holding on to something secure. I always say the kitchen sink is a good secure place to hold on, but anything that's solid for you. If your balance is good and you're just doing this for a little bit of body awareness, a little bit of balance work, you might be able to do this without holding on. The other thing that plays into this is how aggressive are you going to get in getting to the edges of your base of support. If you're somebody with balance problems, you're going to want to do this holding on. But if we go beyond our base of support, the natural consequence is to fall. And not everybody who starts to fall will actually finish the fall, because we also have something we call balance reactions. But in this exercise, we're wanting to explore something we call the limits of stability. So here is my limit of stability. When I get here, I have the sense that if I go any further, I'm going to fall. If I go on this side, I have the sense that if I go any further, I'm going to fall. Now, if you're somebody who has had balance issues and you've become very, very cautious because of fear of falling, it's very likely that as you start to try this exercise in a safe environment, holding onto the sink or hovering your hands above the sink, you may feel like you're going to fall when you've only gotten a little ways out to the edge. You may feel like you're going to fall when you've only gotten a little ways out to the edge. So that's a real opportunity for your body to safely explore what are the limits of your stability, and you may find that you're actually able to improve your balance and improve your limit of stability with practice. This exercise can be changed up just a little bit if you put your foot forward. Now we have a different base of support. It's a diagonal base of support. So now I could do a weight shift that goes diagonally over the front foot and over the back foot. Over the front foot and over the back foot. And again, if your balance is poor, you might only feel like you can go a little ways, but with practice you may be able to go further. But always you want to be able to sense, where is my true limit of stability? Just as a demonstration here, if I go over my limit of stability, at some point I'm going to have to take a step to catch myself. A step is a balance reaction. And so what is essentially taking a step readjusts your base of support so that now you can keep your base of support under your center of gravity. But again, people who have balance impairments do not necessarily take a step quickly enough or effectively enough in order for that to catch their balance. So in that case, the more comfortable you can be in understanding where your limits of stability are, the less likely you are to fall. For a little more fun with this, and just for an exercise, if there's any kids that need a little balance work, usually kids have enough balance work, but sometimes there are kids who struggle with their balance as well. So another variation on this is to make it kind of fun and see how can you move your body. Can you draw a circle between your feet with that imaginary pen? Then we're not only exploring our limits of stability side to side, but also front to back. And we can also do just a straight front to back movement. You're going to find that you can't go as far front to back as you can side to side when you have a wide stance, because we only have a base of support that's as big as the distance from our toes to our heels. So that's going to be a much smaller translation of movement going front to back. Again, any kind of little designs and movement can be a great way to work on your stability. You can also play around a little bit. What happens if you bend your knees as you move? Does that change your limits of stability? What happens if you only move your hips, but you let your head and shoulders stay back the other way? What does that do to your limits of stability? Do you feel like you can go further when you throw just your hips out there, but you bring your head and shoulders back? That's actually a lot of how slalom skiers manage to get all that fancy movement, is they figure out that they can counterbalance themselves by leaning their head and shoulders. Same thing when we go forward back. What happens if you just throw your hips out there and your head goes the opposite direction? You'll find that you can get a sense of getting bigger movement and bigger sway when you can do that. And those are important skills to work on too, getting that little side bending and that little hips forward and hips back. Because the more fearful people become of falling, the more rigid they become. Because they're so afraid of falling, they don't want to get out of their base of support. But when we no longer practice that movement, we actually become more at risk of falls. So when I talked about balance reactions, I said, well, the biggest balance reaction is that if you go too far, you take a step. But more subtle balance reactions would be that if I went too far, I might just tip my head and shoulders to regain my balance. If I go too far forward, I might just throw my hips out to regain my balance. So this exercise in general can include any of those things I've talked about: side to side, forward, back, moving your hips, moving your head and shoulders, letting your body explore movement and find how you're able to go the furthest but still maintain your balance and your safety. So that's what I'm going to cover for today. If anybody has any questions, you can always get in touch with me personally at www.boundlesspt.com. I hope you're all having a great day.